Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As many honourable members will know, Hull is the capital of the caravan manufacturing in the UK, and the Hull MPs have a strong tradition of standing up for the sector. My colleague, the Honourable Member for Hull North, was instrumental in protecting the industry after the global financial crash in 2008, and she was joined by my colleague, the Honourable Member for Hull East, in the fight against the caravan tax during the coalition government. And so I take up the baton with my Hull colleagues today to ask the Government to act to protect this vital industry. I first wrote to the Government on the challenges facing the caravan industry in a letter dated the 20th of May, jointly with my honourable friends, the colleagues for Hull East and Hull North, and addressed to the Prime Minister. In it, we asked that caravan dealerships should be opened at the same time as car dealerships, and that in line with the then current guidance for estate agents and house viewings, caravan parks should also be allowed to open for sales and lettings. I am happy to say that those asks were met by the Government, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Government for heeding the calls from the industry and acting upon them. Because like businesses across the country, caravan manufacturers have also benefited from the Government's economic support measures, including the Job Retention Scheme and the Business Interruption Loan Scheme. But unfortunately, all these measures have not been enough to alleviate sufficiently the pressure on the industry, and without further intervention, the future is stark. The position of the caravan manufacturers set them apart from others in the manufacturing sector, as they are entirely dependent on the trade in the leisure and tourism sector. Yes, of course.
I congratulate the lady for bringing forward this debate. She made a very good point. Would she agree with me that the caravan industry, there's a need to consider it right through its supply chain, from the manufacturing that takes place in Hull and the East Riding, right through to coastal communities like the Waveney constituency that I represent? Because when you sneeze, we get a cold as well.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and he's quite right. As I mentioned, Hull is the capital of the caravan manufacturing in the UK, but that's not to say that it doesn't have a vital industry in other areas of the country as well. But because the caravan manufacturers are not officially part of the leisure and tourism sector, they are not eligible for the extra government support that leisure and tourism enjoy. So I'm here to speak up for an industry facing unique challenges, and one which plays a pivotal role in the prosperity of a region which has no capacity to withstand its loss. The caravan industry is a great British manufacturing success story. The industry supply chain is comprised of caravan manufacturers and their suppliers, which feed into the UK retail network of caravan parks and caravan dealerships and distributors. The industry contributes £9 billion a year to the UK economy and is a growing exporter. Employment within the supply chain stands at 207,580. When the lockdown came on the 24th of March, 3,361 caravan parks closed, along with 381 caravan dealerships. Restrictions on travel were introduced and the public were ordered to stay at home. At a stroke, 2.4 million people were denied the use of their caravan, either static or towed. The result was that the entire caravan manufacturing industry came to an abrupt halt. Notwithstanding the requirements for effective social distancing and hygiene in workplaces, as no more orders were arriving on the company's books, 208 caravan manufacturers and 647 suppliers closed. And currently, 90% of the workforce is furloughed. The manufacturers have been working hard, ensuring their factories can reopen safely for their workers, respecting the relevant distancing and hygiene guidance. However, the caravan industry is a seasonal business, with the prime selling and order period occurring between March and September. This lockdown could not have come at a worse time, right at the start of a crucial period. Closures have continued, the greater the losses have become. And as I speak here in mid-June, with possibly the entire season in jeopardy, the prospect of business failures and substantial redundancies in the winter look inevitable without further government intervention. The tourer and motorhome industry has lost its income from seasonal sales, and the lack of orders taken will leave it unable to sustain itself over winter. The unsold stock in the supply chain will depress whatever demand there is. The static caravan manufacturers face the prospect that whenever caravan parks and holiday parks do reopen, there will be little demand for the production of new units over the winter for the yearly refreshing of rental units. Thousands of employees are currently furloughed. They will either be made redundant, with current estimates of around 40% of the entire workforce, or lose their jobs through company failure. The economic and social impact will be directly felt in areas already under tremendous economic pressure and with high levels of deprivation. This is a thriving industry, or at least it was until COVID-19, and with the right support, it can be a thriving industry once again. And as I said earlier, caravans and motorhome manufacturers have benefited from the government's economic support measures. Most staff are furloughed and they are able to access the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. However, the industry is entirely dependent on trade in the leisure and tourism sector. And leisure and tourism has been rightly identified by the government at the start of their pandemic response as being uniquely impacted by the requirements of the lockdown, the new rules on social distancing and the initial restrictions on even small gatherings. It introduced extra support for this sector. However, the caravan industry has not been made eligible for this support, despite the fact it is totally reliant on the sector. 95% of caravans are privately owned, they're self-contained, and the generous separation distance between units is actually far greater than the spacing of many new detached homes. And as such, they offer perhaps the safest form of leisure and holiday accommodation now that the restrictions on the COVID-19 pandemic has imposed on us and is set to be with us for quite some time. The demand and opportunities for overseas travel are likely to be reduced. Demand for safe, domestic holidays will increase without doubt. A caravan-based holiday could soon register towards the top of the list of holiday accommodation choices. And I speak as someone who's been taking my children, my two daughters, on caravan holidays every year to various haven sites up and down the country since they were both born. So I can personally vouch for the enjoyment of a static caravan holiday. But this demand will not be fully realised until the summer of 2021 at the very least. And whether that demand is met by British manufacturers or their overseas competitors will depend entirely on the actions that the government takes right now. Now, the Labour leader of Hull City Council and the Conservative leader of the East Riding of Yorkshire Council jointly wrote to the Chancellor on the 5th of June asking for clarification on whether the caravan industry is eligible for the business rate relief funded by the government. As the fortunes of the industry are tied directly to the holiday and leisure sector, it would seem to be wholly reasonable for the government to extend them to the same facilities. Their position, the council leader's position, and also that of industry, is that granting such access would allow the local authorities to offer significant support and be invaluable in preventing further job losses, while retaining the capacity to immediately respond to any eventual upturn in the market. I would ask the Minister to urge his colleagues at the Treasury to make this relief available. Currently, the furlough scheme is proposed to be reduced in August, concluding in October. But this coincides with what is normally the latter part of the industry's sales season. As I've already said, the majority of that season has already been lost. Existing surplus stock is likely to cover any pickup in demand before the winter, when sales and consumer orders are normally low, and there is no reason to believe that this winter would be any different. As already mentioned, at the same time, holiday parks who've been normally looking to replace old units and consider expansions are probably going to make do due to lack of funds and confidence. Therefore, while the rest of the economy might be expecting to show signs of recovery as activity and demand begin to grow, the caravan manufacturers will remain in the doldrums with little or no work available until the new cycle begins in spring 2021. I would therefore ask that consideration is given to a flexible, sector-focused approach to ending the furlough scheme, which would allow its extension in the case of the caravan manufacturing industry, so that companies are able to retain staff through an extended period of inactivity. The caravan manufacturing industry is the neck of the supply chain funnel, and it is vital that the government supports it through autumn and winter until spring 2021. This would avoid job losses, safeguard capacity, enable them to respond quickly to improvements in market conditions when they arrive. Can I ask that the Minister impress on his colleagues at the Treasury the exceptional circumstances of this industry, circumstances that set them at odds with what may be happening with the economy as a whole? However, the people of Hull and East Riding, and no doubt the rest of the country, want to work. They don't want to sit at home. And far better than furlough would be orders. As a way of stimulating demand, I would urge the government to consider mechanisms such as allowing static caravan site owners to be able to accelerate capital write-offs or other value-added tax measures. The French government has moved to protect its own caravan manufacturing industry in a special loan scheme for its tourism and leisure sector, which specifically allows the purchase of holiday caravans with no capital payback for the first 2 years. I bring it to the Minister's attention not only because it is worthy of consideration, but to underline the fact that the government cannot assume that foreign competition will be as badly affected as the UK industry currently stands to be. I should also note that France already has a flexible furlough scheme in place for tourism and leisure industry. The National Caravan Council and his members have lobbied hard for the supply chain to be unlocked, and it is now vital that the reopening of caravan parks begins as soon as it is safe to do so. I would urge the government to give clarity to the sector so it can start to make these critical preparations. Following the 2008 financial crash, 3 out of every 10 caravan manufacturers in Hull closed their doors. The workforce in the manufacturing sector and industry reduced by 55%. This was a body blow to the city and the surrounding area. Thousands of families were affected and the effects can still be felt. Hull remains one of the most deprived local authority areas in the country on every metric. The last 2 years have seen an unemployment rate actually rise in Hull. It now faces a round of closures and redundancies that are set to eclipse even the disaster of 2008. If the government's stated intention is truly to level up the country, then Hull and those areas that accompany it at the top of these lists must be the places they begin this process. Those within the industry assure me that without further intervention from the government, the impact of COVID-19 is likely to hit the industry twice as hard as it did in 2008. I cannot bring myself to contemplate the devastation that that would bring. It simply cannot be allowed to happen. I would like to remind the Minister that before the pandemic enveloped us, this was a healthy and growing industry. And it can be again, so long as it is given the support that it needs now. And I urge him to consider its unique circumstances and its vital contribution to some of the most deprived areas in the UK. So once again, I ask him to consider the specific calls for the support I have made here today. The inclusion of the caravan sector in the business rates relief available to the leisure and tourism sector. A flexible sector-specific extension to the furlough scheme. And a package of measures designed to stimulate the leisure and tourism sector to purchase new and replacement stock as it would under normal circumstances. The Minister must engage with the industry and the National Caravan Council and take their case to the Treasury to avoid the destruction of thousands of jobs and the families and communities those jobs support. The government were elected with a promise to level up. It is now time to prove that it is more than just a slogan by supporting the Hull MP's call to protect the caravan industry. The government cannot once again be too slow to act, because along with the 207,580 people employed in the caravan supply sector, I look forward to the Minister's response.